And so while you've got this very strong focus and a very targeted vision, you've also got this really unfettered joy at what you are embarking on as well.
Welcome to Experiences You Should Have, your how-to guide for amazing experiences. I'm Gail, your host, and I have something fun in store for you today. I interviewed a very intriguing woman, Michelle Yana Chan, about her experience of participating in the Peking to Paris Motor Rally. Now, a little bit more on Michelle. Michelle Yana Chan is an award-winning journalist and travel editor of Vanity Fair. She's also a contributing editor at the Condé Nast Traveler, presenter of the BBC's Global Guide, contributor to BBC Radio's Force from Our Own Correspondent, and a writer for the Daily Telegraph. Michelle has also been named the Travel Media Awards Travel Writer of the Year. And she's also the author of a new book, Song, which comes highly recommended, which more information can be found on Michelle and her new book on experiencesyoushouldhave.com and in the show notes for this episode. So Michelle, she knows what she's talking about. And she introduced me to the world of motor rallies. I had never heard of the Peking to Paris Motor Rally until I spoke with Michelle. And I'm not one who knows much about cars either, but her fervor for the event is contagious. And let's just say that my interest is piqued. Now, Peking is now Beijing, but the name of the motor rally hasn't changed. The rally started in 1907, and there have been 7 of these races so far, with the last one just ending on July 7th in 2019. In recent years, this race has been happening every 3 years. So it's time to get your plan on to be a part of the Peking to Paris Motor Rally in 2022. It's never too early to start planning an epic experience. And this episode, an interview with Michelle, will at least give you a good start into what you need to do to make this experience happen. Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for joining me on Experiences You Should Have, your how-to guide for amazing experiences. And I am so excited to hear about your experience of being in the Peking to Paris Motor Challenge. So welcome.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump right in. And can you tell our listeners about your experience of being in the race to Peking to Paris?
To be in the race, well, that's jumping far ahead from the genesis of it, which is coming together, finding a co-driver, finding a vehicle, preparing it for the rally, getting it to Beijing and starting the race. But if you just want to kind of capture some of the spirit of actually being, as you say, kind of on a track or on a road or off-road, more to the point, as you often were in Mongolia, it really is, perhaps you can liken it to a competitive team sport, because there is 2 of you and you are against all these other drivers around you, but on steroids, because this is in an adult world where you've left kind of the freedom and frivolity perhaps of kind of school competitive sport, and this is something that you've taken time out of work, you've invested a lot of money. It was not really an investment, you just spent a lot of money,
Yeah.
and you are for us, we were really trying to win. So I think maybe that's the very honest underpinning for how it felt. I think perhaps you might not get that from everyone, and maybe not everyone wants to win as much as we did. Some just want to participate in a car that probably isn't ever going to win. But we really did, and so if I could try and kind of get across how it felt to be in that vehicle, going as fast as you could without breaking it, which we often did every day. We kind of then it is this very powerful kind of kinship between two drivers. So one acts as a driver, one acts as a navigator, and often that role is flipped. And it's a really intense amount of concentration. That said, there is this transcendental sense of fun too. It's pretty wacky and it's quite wild. And so while you've got this very strong focus and a very targeted vision, you've also got this really unfettered joy at what you are embarking on as well.
Wow. All right. I am interested, and I think our listeners are too. So let's really walk through, what is this race, the Peking to Paris Motor Challenge?
Well, it's called, it's probably quite inappropriate nowadays, the Peking to Paris, as opposed to using the modern day version of China's capital, Beijing, because it started in 1907 when a lot of the people in the West called the city Peking, and the founders of the race too. So it began over 100 years ago, and it was really then more a proof that the motor car could travel long distances. That was kind of the founders' vision. And it was successful. There was two, at least there was a winner, but there wasn't very many participants. But there was this sense that this new invention could actually travel transcontinentally halfway around the world. The idea was that then this would become a regular feature on our calendars, which it didn't. It's still, we're not quite at the finish line yet, but this year is another Peking to Paris, and the last decade plus they've been running every 3 years. But there was a huge absence of the Peking to Paris for a long time, and so this is only the 7th one in 2019 that's actually happening.
Wow.
And but now it is happening every 3 years. It's a vintage and classic car rally that begins in China's capital by for flourish and for kind of grandeur by the Great Wall of China, by a part of it just north of Beijing. And 100 cars, with their driver and navigator team, kind of pile in and take to the road. The journey, the actual route, the itinerary changes depending on what they've learned from the previous one and so forth. But for mine in 2013, it was about 8,000 miles. And you set off, and for those familiar with a rally, it's quite a classic type of rally, in that there will be long stretches which you just have to get to a certain point by a certain time, and then you don't lose points or you don't lose kind of a position. But then there's some timed trials. There's sections of road or off-road where you're going as fast as you can, and those are really meaningful when it comes to kind of the adjudicating and your positioning. And on top of that, there was also some track times where you're going around a track with obstacles and so forth. So this is quite kind of classic rallying, but for those who don't know about it, there's this kind of combination of ways that you're tested on your driving skills over the course of that distance, and all that data is put together to kind of come up with a winner. So over that kind of a distance, it's not just first past the post. All the cars are older than the year 1976, and there are various categories. So there is an overall winner, but there's classic cars which are slightly newer, and vintage cars which are slightly older, which was the category that we were in, and is arguably kind of the one that everyone wants to win.
Mm-hmm.
And we drove in a 1940 Ford coupe or coupe, depending on your pronunciation. And around us were all sorts of fascinating vehicles from, well, very kind of vintage Bentleys to classic Mercedes. There was one of my favorites was a 1929 Rolls-Royce 20, which was beautiful, but I don't think that got through Mongolia at all. There was, I remember a Jaguar that really foundered crossing some floodwater. There were some Aussies in a 1927 Vauxhall, and that was loaded, I kid you not, just a few hours after we began the race. It was loaded onto the back of a truck. So some really don't make it, sometimes beyond the first day. And
Wow.
and this is a 33-day experience, and lots of cars don't make it across Mongolia. And so you're seeing them on trucks, and some of them decide, oh well, I'll just go home. Some decide to kind of try and fix it up and then try and catch up with the race a week later. They're disqualified from kind of competing, but they just want to kind of join the fray.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an extraordinary race. It's arguably the most thrilling, the most kind of desired vintage classic car rally to join, and it was for me too.
Wow. That is, it just feels mind-blowing to me to take these vintage cars on such a long journey. What are the roads? What's the terrain like to make it from Beijing all the way to Paris?
A real mix. So in China, for those first few days before you cross the border into Mongolia, it's tarmac and it's kind of regular roads, really. You're kind of winding through the hills and northern China, but they're all excellent roads. And then you enter Mongolia, and there's some good roads until you hit the capital, Ulaanbaatar. It's a bit of a mix, really. But then from Ulaanbaatar, the capital of Mongolia, until the Altai and the far western border of the country, that is mostly just all off-road. And you just choose a track, if there is a track, a car might have gone that way before, or you just make your own, headway. After you cross it, so a lot of the cars come to an end in Mongolia, which is quite brutal that it's so soon into the race, because if that meant, if that was at the end, then, there would be a lot more that kind of stayed the course for the first 20 days. But on the other hand, I think if Mongolia had been at the end, if it had been the Paris to Peking, the cars by that time would be so wrecked. Maybe no one would get through a country like Mongolia. So when you hit, in our case, Russia, so the route does really change time to time, and this is where it would change. Sometimes it goes through the stands, and sometimes it goes through Russia. We went through Russia a lot, and through the Altai, it was very there's some high altitude passes with cars that that really needed to kind of be on oxygen in order to get across some of those passes. And but then after that, it's some really, really gruelingly tough, boring roads of just straight and long, and you've got to kick some big distances, and there's lots and lots of trucks on these journeys, and they're overtaking and you're overtaking and people are overtaking from the other. And that's where it felt probably strangely the most dangerous. I don't think the big hazards were either turning in Mongolia, if your car flips, or dying on the roads in eastern Russia, which unfortunately, we did lose someone.
Oh,
And then you continue kind of, push through. Right, I mean, the roads are excellent in Russia, but they're just busy. They're just really busy with traffic, and then you head into, we headed into Ukraine and then into Europe, and again, like another tough part of Europe is they take you through the Alps, through some of those switchback roads at high altitude again. When your car is, you're just panting to get to Paris at the end, and it's tough. It's really tough to, everything's overheating, and if you haven't, I mean, we fix the car every night. It felt like, I mean, it didn't feel like we absolutely fixed the car every day and every night. There were other vehicles that people went to dinner sometimes if we were in the city. We never went out for dinner. I mean, most of the time we were there until a few nights, all night. We then had to sleep in the car and take turns to sleep in the car because we hadn't slept kind of the night that we were staying somewhere. So, and then finally you kind of leave the Alps and you get into southeast France, and yes, and then it's very hard to change your position, I'd say. So we kind of were there, we were in third. In truth, we were slightly kind of slipping into fourth, and we managed to maintain kind of a place on the podium. But it's hard. The unfortunate thing about the last couple of days for us was that it's very hard then to win if you're not in first position. So it's slightly just a journey to Paris for the last 2 days. And then amazingly you drive up the Champs-Élysées, and you head into Place Vendôme, and all these cars are arranged in order, and it's extraordinary. And then the French are incredibly supportive, as they always are with endeavours of this undertaking. The French are just brilliant about that, and they just come in their droves and ask you all the right questions that make you feel like it was worth it, and it is a fantastic feeling. And we absolutely, I mean, it was mixed for us, of course, because we want to, well, we both of us, we wanted to win, so it was this very mixed feelings of jubilation and yeah, we didn't quite get to where we wanted to, but still that day of euphoria is standing on the bonnet of your car, I think the roof of our car, in fact, while we popped some champagne. It was really great fun.
Which I hear that's a race tradition. At the end of the race, you have a big glass of champagne. Is that right?
Oh, I think a big bottle of champagne, I think. So there's no prize, which is always, a lot of people ask that question. It's just for the glory. And, I think there's a very inexpensive medal that everyone gets for competing, and a kind of, there's a cup that one can hold above their heads just for the fun of it. But there's no prize at all. It's just for cracking a bottle and slapping each other on the back and feeling good about the last 33 days.
Wow. I mean, this sounds like a true experience you should have, and an adventure across 36 days. And
33, yeah.
Or yours is 33? Okay. Is that maybe because of the race length? Does that change? Might the length change over the years?
Yeah, sorry, I thought you were referring to maybe something I said. No, I think you're right. I mean, the route has changed over the years, and the itinerary has changed, and I'm sure that you're right that number is slightly fluid in terms of race days, and definitely in terms of where there was definitely a race that they were crossing borders, and now it's more tricky to cross and so forth, and so sometimes it's politics that gets in the way, sometimes it's just practicals and logistics. But and I think they learned from our race that the really long Russian roads with lots of heavy loaded trucks was hard in a different way for everyone. And of course we had this loss of life, so that probably made them rethink some of the journey that we did.
Now, why should someone experience this adventure?
Why not? I would argue straight back. I think it's one you'll never regret. That I can be sure. It does require quite a big outlay of money and, of course, time. But I think that, of course, in my humble opinion, it was incredibly worthwhile. There are ways and means around that. And I've kind of worked on the way, and we also got sponsorship. But they should do it because they love traveling, they love cars, they love the sense of occasion and the history that comes before it. They want to perhaps have an interesting, evolving relationship with somebody else who they think would be a good partner for this kind of a journey. They want to. I would. You're not having this cultural experience because you're just whizzing through a landscape. But the travel in it is that you're watching two continents change as you're driving, and even if it's at a bit of a blur, that's a very conscious thing. And obviously, when we're getting into an airplane and coming out on the other end, 10 hours later, it's a very different experience. But by the travel that you get from this it's not this kind of, it's not the details or the minutiae that you get from an ordinary trip, but you get a very macro sense of how terrain changes and how the shapes of people's faces change and the complexions change, and how that actually is this incredibly organic morphing of people and landscape that of course you lose completely when you fly. So that's the kind of travel experience I think that you have, and there are some extraordinary individual experiences that you'll have en route, because as much as a lot of your life is going to be spent in the cabin of your vehicle or under your vehicle, kind of, greasy fingered, there are, you will discover that you need a lot of help on the way. And this strangers, the kindness of strangers is an extraordinary thing, and perhaps that was the most meaningful memories of coming from the individuals that we met in very obscure places. Sometimes we'd stop in the middle of Mongolia, we'd look around us and it was completely empty of any sign of settlement or life, and then a family would pop their head up behind a bush and somehow have exactly the right screw that we needed in their back pocket. And it was those kind of serendipitous encounters that I think are the magic of the Peking to Paris. And I would do it again probably, but there's a lot of other rallies out there. But I loved it so much that I would consider doing it again.
Wow, I absolutely love that description. Let's just get into some logistics here. If one of our listeners is thinking about entering this race, what they need to know. So first off, how far in advance should you plan to do this? And what are the types of things you've got to sort out in order to even enter the race?
Yeah, so it does, unlike most ordinary vacations or even kind of climbing a mountain, much of that can be organized in days or weeks or a few months to get perhaps fit, but this is probably years unless you have a vehicle that is rally ready, and plus it's become really popular. Dare I say it, there was a lot of coverage of my race because of I was working, so I was there was a lot of exposure, and so since that rally there is it's been much higher. Like I think we booked onto it, I think maybe 18 months or 2 years before, but now I think they're full for the next one, and so I think people would be looking at 2025, although I could be wrong, maybe there's a wait list for 2022. And so there's a long lead time, but in truth you slightly do need that, as I said, unless you have a car ready and unless you have the funds already, because it's expensive, and there's the cost of the rally itself, which the freshest figures I could find is this, and it was the same when we entered, was 50,000 amounts to, it's in pounds because it's a British organization, but it amounts to just over $50,000 for the two of you, so per car, and that's that kind of works out that you'd say, oh, that works out at about $1,400 a day, but that's just one price tag. There's also fuel, obviously, which is quite a lot. It's kind of shipping the vehicle to Beijing from wherever you are in the world, and then shipping it from Paris to wherever you are in the world, unless you happen to be in one of those two cities. And insurance, you can imagine that's not cheap.
Right.
The car insurance, but and medical insurance. Well, I think that's kind of that's a little bit more regular. The big ticket price, unless you are armed with this already, which we weren't, is a car. And if you're serious about trying to win, then it's got to, the car can be cheap as chips. We bought it on the internet from a guy in Michigan from a picture. It was just a rolling shell. There was nothing in it. It was just kind of metal sheets stuck together, and we shipped it over to the UK. And then we started shopping, cherry picking parts from the internet. I mean, the internet has completely changed preparing a rally car, but we found parts for the car from all over the world, and we put it together, and we put some of that out to professionals as well. So it was a real mix, but that is expensive business, and it's hard to put a figure on, because some people are doing vintage Rolls Royces, and some people are doing kind of more robust American cars, like the one that we chose to do it in. And we deliberately chose a Ford, basically the Chevys and the Fords and the Chryslers of the vintage that we were in, kind of the late 30s, 40s, that kind of era. Those were the cars that were built for long distance. Whereas, all the beautiful Ferraris and Rolls Royces and Bentleys and Jaguars and Lamborghinis, all of those, Porsches, all of those were built really kind of for showing off on beautiful European coastal roads. And we're not there for doing these big distances. Whereas these big old American cars were all about kind of car salesmen, kind of with big boot trunks, as you call them, trunks, filling them with their wares and heading across thousands of miles of American landscape to kind of sell their wares. And it's a great type of car. They've constantly been in the top 3, those kinds of cars, because the big trunk you turn into a space for fuel, for a massive fuel tank, so you're stopping less frequently. And they do kind of know about distance, those kind of vehicles. So putting a price on that, is a tougher, but I mean, it's very, very hard to do that for under $100,000, I would say. And very easy to do that for over $200,000. And most people, of course, because these figures are so high, get sponsorship. But there is a lot of people that don't, because a lot of people who do this, who've got time, and those kind of numbers are very successful, older people who are kind of in their 50s or 60s. They're running a company, they're captains of industry, and she or he feel like they're able to take off that chunk of time, and they've got the money as well to back themselves on that kind of a trip. We were so not that category. So and so were others too. And so we sought sponsors who would be interested in that kind of race. We had one that was a Chinese insurance company. We had a British tour operator. And we just, and it's very, people cover the sides of their cars in stickers from sponsors. And that's one way of kind of dealing with these very high price tags.
Now, as far as experience, do you need to be an experienced rally driver to enter the race? And also, do you need to know how to fix cars
Yes,
to be on the race?
You need to know how to fix cars. I think if you've built your own car, you've been involved in the process of building your car, that stuff just, which you really should. I mean, if to kind of source, to outsource that entire process could be fine, but you do really need to know how the workings of your car. Now, these are easy cars compared to our modern day cars, where we can't fix our cars anymore because they're so driven by computers. To fix a car, you need to kind of plug it into a computer, and then it tells you where the problem is. But these older cars, they are so analog. If you know how an engine works, it's they're much more straightforward. And if you've got any engagement in your car, which I think you would have if you were embarking on this kind of a trip, then it's automatically this interest. So yes, you absolutely need to know how to fix your car. You need to have, we left the manual by the side of our bed the day we left. So we kind of thought, oh my Christ, how are we gonna remember? But in truth, everything is in your head, because you spent so much time with this vehicle. And you've got to practice in it too, and practice changing. One of the things we'll be doing a lot of is changing tires. I think we changed 9, was it, or 13? We changed a lot of tires over the course of a month plus, and you really want to change a tire quickly. So we used to sit in a front drive and with a stopwatch, and then just say, ready, steady, go, and then we'd jump out of the car and. And we must have done that, dozens and dozens of times, so that we were getting really slick. at changing tires as quickly as we could. And so, yes, I think there are the race itself, the rally organizers, they do have mechanics who are around, but the journeys can be spread out from a very long way, and their job isn't to fix your car. Their job is really to kind of find a tow truck for you, or to kind of give you assistance, but they are not, their job is meant to be quite softly kind of curtailed, and so it is really you and your co-driver against everybody else.
Now, what if you have that car know-how, but you've never driven in a rally race before? Could this be your first race?
It was our first race. So yes is the answer to that. I think the only practice that we did was we went to South Wales, a few hours to the west of London, and where we knew there was some empty roads and some long beaches to practice on sand. But it wasn't actually, that was in our car. But then we also went to the Alps, and we did some ice driving, but in modern cars, but just to get a sense, because ice driving is very similar to driving on sand and on gravel. And then we did some in our car. We did some driving around some fields as fast as we could. I think absolutely. I mean, that probably in summary makes it sound like we did an awful lot of prep work, but we didn't. That was probably amounted to 5 days, and we both love to drive. We both love to drive quite quickly. I think you've got to have a love of speed and a fearlessness attached to that. And but absolutely, it can be your first rally. People that generally win are more experienced ralliers. Maybe that. But we'd never done a rally, and we came third. So it's totally possible. Of course it is, and perhaps perhaps you can also win. Who knows? But but there were some very, very serious ralliers on ours, and I think subsequently that I've seen some of the same names pop up. So it's a real mixed bag, and there's some very kind of serious mechanics too. There was a Porsche that was driving, and one of the co-drivers nicknamed Dr. Porsche, because he is kind of the most renowned Porsche engineer. So I think there's a lot of quite serious professional skill set around one. But you can be as green as you like, and it turns out you can do quite well.
I love that. And as far as navigating on this route, I know you probably don't have access to Google Maps in the middle of Mongolia. How are you able to stay on track and get to the next spot if you don't have service?
No, well, it is done mostly by GPS. So you do have a navigation system, and you have something called a monet, which measures kind of the distance that you're driving very accurately. Well, you have to kind of calibrate that when you start, so that it kind of has a kilometer kind of down, and so that you recalibrate that every now and then, because it does lose distance after a while. But it's definitely with tools and with apps that you're doing it, not necessarily through your phone, but through other kind of GPS networks and other technology that you kind of fix to your windshield. And there are rallies out there. The rally I next want to do is in Sahara. It's an all-women's rally, and that is proper old-fashioned navigation. There's no phones, no sat phones, no GPS, no. It's all pencil and paper and hard copy maps. So those do exist, but this one you absolutely, particularly in Mongolia, are allowed to use GPS. After that, we did mostly use hard copy maps, in truth, because it really gives you a sense of scale and distance. So in Russia, we were using these massive kind of ring-bound maps to get a sense of where we were going and different routes that one could take. So it was a bit of a mix, but yes, the technology in this one plays an important part.
Great. And as far as what you should bring for this race, what were some of your most used items that you used along your journey?
I would say bring as little as possible, because just like it's slightly my advice for any trip at all, but The only stuff you should really be taking is stuff to fix the car and
Mm-hmm.
spare parts. And in terms of your own personal items, you really don't want to take more than a few t-shirts. Everyone wears these kind of mechanic suits kind of to go over the clothes that you're wearing when you're under the car trying to fix things, just so that your t-shirt the next day is clean. But God, we're absolutely filthy. The reason I'm kind of low on gear is because I was so geared up. I was taking all sorts of video cameras and stills cameras and laptops, and I was kind of sending all this information back to editors in London, and so I had so much. I had really heavy bags, and it meant that when we were going into a property, sometimes you camp and sometimes you're staying in kind of guest houses. For a security point of view, I was having to lug all that in, and I did think, God, what a dream it would be if I wasn't working, because all you would then need is just slightly an overnight, a toothbrush and a change of underwear and a change of shirt, but probably not every day, dare I say it. And there's a lot of washing in the streams and so on. So the most used items would all be related to fixing the car. Really, there was nothing useful from a personal. This is not a vacation, so it was all about tools and spare parts. And you can never have enough of those. I would say, like we were going through spare parts all the time.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you ever have two flat tires at the same time, or was it typically only one bad tire at a time?
In the same day?
Or even at the same time, did you ever blow out two tires? Did you need to have
In the
multiple
same.
tires?
No, I think we did have two in the same day, but not in the same moment.
Okay, good,
Sounds
good.
like something you've had.
I mean, this sounds like an incredible adventure, and you just don't know what to expect on each day and who you're going to meet. And I guess you know where your car is going to go, but uh, this this sounds just really fun and a lot of hard work. Yeah. Do you have any additional tips that you would give to our listeners if they are thinking about embarking on this race?
Um, I would say, I mean, not to kind of repeat myself, but I would say pack lighter than you think when it comes to kind of oneself, and slightly heavier when it comes to tools and spare parts. That would be kind of my critical one.
Mm-hmm.
I would say also be quite boot camp organized when it comes to the navigator particularly. It's quite good to have color coded pens and like a pencil and an eraser, because it's really useful to kind of for errors, and that these folders are all put. There's maybe a place that you can build in the car where you have all the maps kind of next to each other, and a lot of it comes through organization. You have specific times that you need to leave certain places, and you don't want to lose because you just didn't get on top of the admin. That would be painful. Like if your car blows up, that's one thing, but if you just miss time because your timesheet was in the wrong pocket of the car and you couldn't find it, that would be really quite painful. So I think kind of an organization of all the paperwork, which is actually strangely quite heavy, would be useful. I think from a safety point of view, like we had an internal frame to the car. Some people, would want to wear helmets. I think we might wear helmets if we did it again. But from a safety point of view, that's something to definitely consider. And I think being brave is one of the, because if you want to go for this and try and win it, it does require quite a lot of courage, just at those moments when you're feeling sick to your stomach and don't. And there was an incredible moment kind of in Western Russia just before we entered Ukraine, where we were driving on kind of regular roads, but in a quite rural area. And this Russian couple were on the side of the road on the left, and looked like she was taking a photo, and I couldn't really see what his sign said. But there's a lot of people cheering you on the sides of the roads around towns. And most of those are in the local language, and that might have been in Cyrillic. But as we got closer, we read what he had written in English, and it's a very kind of Slavic looking couple. And it said, "Fortune favors the brave." And we really felt that, like we had chill bumps. And we really felt that, at the times when we'd been the most tired, exhausted to the point of exhaustion, where we'd been the most frustrated, where we'd really had to dig deep, we knew that every time that we took a very brave, courageous move, it paid off. And that is to do with the ebb and flow as well. Like there was days when my co-driver was more tired and I wasn't, and we pick each other up. In other days, it wasn't always that. There was days definitely when we were both tired, but it is that teamwork of trying to engender courage in the other is, I think, really important if you're quite serious about the race.
That is so well said. And that applies to many parts of our lives. I feel like it's when we take those bravest steps in life is when it has the biggest payoff.
Right.
So, oh, what a metaphor. Um, Truly, Michelle, thank you for joining us today on Experiences You Should Have. I will be including a full write-up of the experience as well as links to additional sources to give more information of how you could sign up for this race and photos. So please go to experiencesyoushouldhave.com. And Michelle, is there any last words you'd like to add?
Well, no, just that the next one I'm thinking about, if there's any women are listening who are interested in a rally, it's much more doable in terms of time, and it's a lesser financial commitment. There's a rally in Morocco, mostly in the Sahara, and it's called the Rallye Aïcha de Gazelle, and that's every year around March. And it's just over a week long, and it's not old cars, it's modern cars, and there is a co-driver, and you only use old-fashioned equipment, and it's quite you're very off-grid. And I think that one, I haven't done it yet, but I'm hoping to do it in March next year. That one for me, I think, is extraordinarily like an aspiration. I would love to compete in that. So if someone isn't doesn't have the time, or and they're a woman, which is then I would look at that one too. I think that one sounds really exciting. It's definitely captured my imagination.
That sounds fantastic. And after March, we'd love to have you back on the show and really hear about that experience.
Thank you, Gail, for having me, and thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening to Experiences You Should Have, your how-to guide for amazing experiences. And I have a very important task for you to do. Right now, you need to call your mom, call your brother, sister, father, ex-boss, your worst enemy, whoever it is in your life that you might be thinking about at this moment in time, and tell them about Experiences You Should Have podcast, because what we're trying to do, or at least what I'm trying to do, is introduce the world to unique experiences that can be replicated and give a how-to guide to make them happen. And I put a lot of work into this show, and if you could just tell someone, tweet, Instagram, whatever it is that you do, I would greatly appreciate it. Also, if you are an Apple user and you are listening to this on Apple Podcasts, and if you love the show, I would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. And if you don't like the show, then please do not leave a review. I don't want to hear about it, don't want to see it. And also, if you know of a unique experience that can be replicated, preferably off the beaten path, that you would like to share, then go to experiencesyoushouldhave.com, click on contact, and shoot me a note, because it might wind you up on the show. Also, if you would like to find out more information about the Peking to Paris Motor Rally, including links, pictures, more information. Go to experiencesyoushouldhave.com, click on episodes, and there you're going to see a beautiful, well-written show note on this episode, plus many other show notes from past episodes that can give you that true guide to make these cool things happen in life. And we always walk through costs, skills needed, best time, and get you on that roadmap to know how you need to save and what you need to do to get there. And I am an experienced person. I figure if you are listening to the show, you are also an experience seeker. And us experience seekers got to band together and learn about cool new experiences to make happen in the world. So thank you for listening and truly appreciate it. And until next time.